Let's get started, guys, for today's session. So, in this session, probably we will work on a couple of use cases again, right? So, let's talk about use case. And in the recent sessions, right, we had a validation of password, right? So, we will extend to that functionality. Okay. So, implementing design, design and implement the login functionality. Okay. See, you have to design and implement the login functionality, right? So first of all, in order to work on this particular use case, so what basically we need actually? So we need a system where we need a place where username and password getting stored, right? And when it comes to the validations, right? Let's say in our organization there might be a number of users accessing the application. Got it? So we need to authenticate user. After authentication only, we are able to make a successful application call or API call, whatever it is. A transaction will happen, right? So in order to work on this particular use cases, for example, let us take a very basic use case where imagine instead of database, data is stored in your let's say dictionary format. For example, uh, assume your data, or we will mimic, right? Mimic mimic the database here. Say, for example, let's say um, user table. For example, from the user table, for example, users equal to, right? When it comes to users, user has basically two things, right? One is username and the other one is password. Got it? Let's say username, username and password, two things, correct? So imagine, so first of all, let's start understanding, writing up basic algorithm and understanding our part. Okay. So first thing, right? So in order to work on this particular use case, so first thing we need to understand the algorithm. So first, um, store the user credentials, right? Store the user credentials. What is the second step? So once the credentials ready, right? And you can ask user to see once it is available, right? Uh, write a function, write a function which takes user inputs. We got it? Like username and password. Got it? And third use case. So third step. So once we take the once we get the credentials, now we have to validate. Correct? Validate the user credentials. Got it? Validate user credentials. If valid, then only um, return authentication successful message. Got it? And fourth use case, sorry, fourth step. Once it is done, right? Um, allow user to proceed. You got it? So currently it's a very basic one. We can extend, creating a JWT token and many things, much more. Okay, but this is the basic steps, right? Um, now, now who can take the opportunity to implement this functionality? Who want to try? Okay, so I think this particular use case I'll go with it, and like there will be assignment on a couple of more use cases on this. Yeah. So, for example, store the user credentials. First step, right? Step number one. So I want to store, like we need to define, or we need to have a thought process that on what data types we can use for storing the credentials. So since it is very clear that username and password, isn't it? So there is a key and value pair. So what is the data type that supports key and value pair? Dictionary, right? Let's say user user credentials, right? User credentials equal to. So imagine the user details. Let's say first user John Doe, okay, and his password is, let's say, some characters. Let's say John @1234, for example. Also, we had one more user. For example, let's say Adiana, whose password is s- some junk characters, something like this. Yep, and colon question mark some h, something like this. Yeah. So now I am done with step number one. So generally this data we will this data will be available in the database. Now since we need to mimic it, since we didn't had a database session, right? So that's where I'm mimicking it and having the data here itself in the application itself, okay, for testing purpose, right? Next, write a function to take the see now we have to write a function to get the data from the user, right? Correct. So now write a function to take a user inputs like username and password. Got it? So def, how we can get it? So get credentials. Got it? So this is a function should be invoked. And for this function, I don't need anything, but just like this function takes does not take any input, any parameter, but it takes a, let's say, username or user underscore name. Yeah, user underscore name equal to input function, enter uh, username. Got it? Now I'm storing that username into one variable, username variable, right? And password equal to, again, I'm taking the input from the user, enter password. Make sense? Once I have taken both the values, username and password, right? So what you're supposed to be doing? You're supposed to return it, right? That's what the task is very simple. Write a function to take the user inputs like username and password and return it unwritten both. Got it? Yeah. Now how you can return? If you want to return two values, so simple. Return perfect password. That's it. You're done with it. Next, what is the next function? Validate, right? So to validate the function, df or authenticate, authenticate. Okay. Yeah. So actually authenticate function should be inside authenticate function. Generally, um, we have to call this, see inside this, it should be, you will be calling this function, okay? So here, and since it is passing to, right, let's say uh, username and password, because okay, it'll come to know. Let me, so before this, right, let me also execute and show you how the first functionality is working, right? So here, if I want to see, if I want to test the uh, okay, test the get credentials, right? So how it works? Simply, you can print, uh, right? So what is function in get credentials? You have to call this function just like that, you know. So once you start calling this function, right? So did you see this? I just called a get credentials function, and it went in here and started executing the statements of the function. So first function is, let's say, whatever I give, let's say for example, um, Kumar Makala and password is some random, you know, got it? Did you see whatever password I given here to the function, right? So it simply written those two in the tuple, because since I'm returning multiple variables in the function, right? So it returns in a form of tuple. Got it? Yeah. So now since we have this data, okay, we need to understand one more concept actually. So when it comes to the assignment, right? So assignment operators. For example, if I write a comma b equal to 10 comma 20, to understand this concept actually, okay. So generally, if you write like this, a comma b equal to 10 comma 20, so the based on the position, so a takes 10 and b takes 20. You got it? Also, you can also group like this, a comma b equal to 10 comma 20. Still what happens, see, since there are two are available, right? So it takes 10 to a and 20 to b. Did you get it? Yeah. And even if you write even if you write a comma b equal to, let's say, 20 comma 30, something like this, or anything is fine, you know. Or you can write a comma b equal to anything, something, something like that. See, whatever you write, whatever the way you write, but still it's if I start executing, you'll come to know. Let me comment this, right? And finally, if I print a comma b, you understood, like, so final a comma b is what, 1030. It should printing 1030. Did you see this? Meaning there is no issue with this. Syntactically, there is no problem. You got it? What I mean? So what I'm trying to say here is, when we are assigning multiple values, multiple variables names, and multiple values, right? So based on the order, it will take. But if you put some extra, right, it will throw error. You got it? It's actually it should not take, because it's exceeded, right? Did you see? Values error, line number 25. So 25 is a comma b equal to 10, 20, and 30. So since the packing, right? So see, these two can take these two, but one extra guy is there. That's why it is complaining that, hey, it's a value error, I cannot take one more value, too many values to unpack, expected two. Yeah, makes sense. This for your understanding, guys, right? And why I have written this, you'll have a understanding now. So the reason is very simple. You know, this particular function, right, which returns a tuple of username and password. Got it? That we just tested. Now, now we have to validate it. Is it? So in order to validation is like authentication. Authent Authentication. Okay. So this is a function, but in order to authenticate, I want to take two values, right? Two username and password. You got it? See, I can pass this username and password two ways. So I can collect username and password. You got it? I can collect username and password and then pass it to the function, or I can directly call this get credential function inside the authentication function. You got it? So for example, if I do this, okay, and here, since this function will return me, so once I call this function, that meaning using one function definition, and function calling into another function. You got it? You got the use case now? So we are calling a function, we are calling this function in another function definition. You got it? Yeah. So here, let's say username is you and password is p, for example. Imagine. Okay. You can write username and password, anything is fine. And if you try to print, let's say after executing this, even when you call this function, so syntactically no problem here. Why? Because okay, let me print it here. So print user entered, or say user, say username, for example. No, our understanding purpose. Okay, say user, this person, right? User is you. This for our application logs actually. We don't print anyway. We don't expose, but your understanding purpose. User trying to log in, for example, with credentials. Make sense? Just that. Now, what I'll be doing? See, before implementing anything, right? Let me do some basic test. Okay, I'll call this function now. See, if I call this authentication function, now I am not calling, get credentials function, because I'm calling anyway. This is inside the authentication function here. Okay. Now, when I call this get authentication, what happened? So it will go authentication function definition and start executing the lines, right? And the very first line, what it has the get credentials function definition, right? Which means that from here, this is a function call, right? Right? Function call will happen here. So let's say like one, I'm giving one, meaning when I make this call, it comes here, okay, and I'm giving step number 2 here, meaning it will go. So when we make a call, it comes here, and since the definition, right? So since the function call, it goes, executes, got it, and returns username and password. Did you got it? Yeah. And then it comes and execute this line number 3. Sorry, step number 3. Understood? So meaning I'm just explaining the flow, guys. As soon as there is a function call comes here, right? This is a very first step. It started triggering this function call, and it goes here, get the username and password, since we are returning from here. And once we pass this here, meaning this function call has some username and password, and we are storing username to you and password to p. Make sense? And we just had a print statement. Let's try to test this. Make sense? Yeah. So here, username, let's say Kumar Makala is the username, and password k at the rate something character, right? Did you see this? So we just trigger this function, authentication function. It went here, get credentials, and it went in here, taken the username and password, and written this user details, right? And I stored this user details into u1p variables. Got it? And I'm printing it, user trying to log in with credentials, Kumar Makala, for example, and password is this. Got it? Yeah, with username, with credentials, Kumar Makala, and password. Make sense? And now what we need to do? We need to basically authenticate the user. If authentication is successful, then only login successful. Otherwise, failed. Got it? So now we need to implement the No, we taken username and password, but the how should be the use case if the valid user, which means that user should be available in the user credentials dictionary. If it is available here, then only it's a valid user, otherwise not a valid user. Got it? And in order to validate, what we can do, we can create one more, like this is authentication, right? So in the authentication you can create here itself, or you can create a, so anyway that's fine, we can use one more, say validate valid credentials, makes sense. Valid credentials. So in this particular case, how this supposed to be? So valid credentials anyway, since we know the username and password, correct? So we will be getting username and password. Let's say username, or you can say since we are passing U and P, right? You can just type the same thing. You can use a different variable also. So to make sense, I'm using the same variable. Got it? And here. And once I have the username and password, got it. So how this can be tested? So this can be tested in a very simplistic way, because since we know the dictionary, right? How we can access dictionary? So simple. So if you want to check, let's say, so how to check whether the key is available or not? Or you can simply do one thing, that you can try with, see, instead of that, whether username exists or user exists or not, then only you have to do some other validation. Got it? Cool. So in the during the exception handling concept, we also understand how to raise exceptions, right? For example, user is a user details we have, and we also have a password. So first we need to check whether, so let me put pass now, because I don't want to implement this, but I need to implement whether user exists or not. Got it? So let me write one more function, df is valid user. Okay. So for this, what I need? I need a username or use. Makes sense, right? Correct. So once I have the user details, username. So how I can check? So this is the dictionary, is it? So how I can check whether this particular user, let's say John Doe is the user. That's a valid case. It's a Adriana, valid case. Kumar Makala, not a valid case. Why? Because Kumar Makala is not a credentials, like he don't have any credentials with this table. Hence, he is not a right or a valid user for this case. If it is not a valid user, we have to raise a application error saying that, hey, this user is like some unknown user trying to access the application. So that we have to alert the respective groups or teams, saying that even the Slack channel notifications, right? Say that that alert only. No, if someone else other than the organization people trying to access your application, so that's going to be threat to the company. Understood? So we have to make alerts. Even we have to alert the messaging system, auto calling system, alert the mail notifications through notifications, right? Through multiple teams chart or Slack notification chart, something like that. Got it? Yeah. And one, so is valid user. Now we need to implement. See, it's very simple. So if, for example, if user in, see, when you're performing in operator on the dictionary, right? It will check it will check whether that particular key is available or not. Okay. So to check it's very simple. If user in user credentials, make sense? Then no problem. Return true. Got it? Else raise raise um, permission error. The error type is permission error or value error. That both should be fine. Value error. Say, yeah, yeah, invalid. user. Okay, so this for our log purpose. Okay, invalid user, put the format string here. You make sense. Invalid user, and so logic to alert alert the people. But no problem. Currently, we don't want to alert. We don't want to include any other complex logic, but just to have a basic logic. Understood. And even guys, one more important thing when we are implementing functionalities, right? So we need to implement we need to test one by one. So since the first function to what uh, to get the credentials from the user. Second, second we created validate the credentials. Now we didn't validate it, but kind of validation. And third, we had a we are checking whether a user is valid user or not. Understood. And the fourth one is authentication function. Okay, we can check individually. Okay, we tried experimenting checking with like authentication function. We were able to see uh, it is taking the data of username and password, and it is printing. This is fine. And uh, which means this is tested. Understood. And let's test the other function like is valid user. Got it? Is valid. So we have to understand, we have to categorize. Like whenever there is a functionality, you need to understand how many functions are supposed to return. Okay, for individual persons, right? So you can write everything in one place also. In one function, you can do every job, but that is not a maintainable code. It's not a readable code also. It become horrible for other new joiner, who are taking place of yours, right? When you leave the company, that's going to be horrible for the a developer, right? In order to make that's where even we don't recommend, we don't even approve that code, right? So let's try to understand now. So I'm just testing the other function is valid user function. Make sense? So let's say currently I'm passing, for example, Kumar Makala. So what is the function? What is the variable? I passed the value as Kumar Makala, and I pass this user to here this function, right? And it takes Kumar Makala, right? Now you becomes Kumar Makala if you in user credentials, meaning if Kumar Makala exists in dictionary, it will check in the only keys, guys. So if somewhere it's found in the password part, it will not. Okay, yeah. So since not available, okay, if user is available, then it returns function returns true. Else, what it will do? If it is fails, the condition got failed, for example, for some reason, right? Not some reason. So if the username is not exist in this available users, right? What happened? Immediately it comes to else block and raise the value error. Say that invalid user attempting to log in. You got it? Now, so if I call this function, only see, though we have this many functions, right? Let me remove this case. Not this numbering is not. Yeah. Now, when I call this function, what will happen? Though we had four functions, only one function will be triggered. Which is the one? So the function calling is valid user function calling, and it goes here and trigger this. And who can tell me what will be the output? Perfect. Right. Did you see? Invalid user Kumar Makala attempting to log in. Did you see this error? And this error actually we will pump it to Splunk logs. So whatever the logs, right, we were having. So currently we are not we were not using logging mechanism, but I think upcoming sessions we will include logging module as well, so that whatever transactions or whatever the application logs, right, we will pump all the print message logs to the one log file. From there, what we do is we will pump it to Splunk so that we can see every information in the Splunk system, Splunk application, right? That would be very helpful for the support team, Yeah. So this is invalid. Now, so this is a bad case. Imagine, let me try with the other use case where that's a valid user. So what is a valid user? For example, John Doe. Okay. So if I print this, now there is no error out, right? Why? Because John Doe is a valid user. You got it? If I print, did you see? Which means the function is perfectly working. You got it? Yeah. So this is how we have to check. We have to test each and every functionality so that your function will be capable of handling properly, right? Yeah. Now you have tested this as well, correct? And now validate credentials, right? So in the credentials, so before validating credentials, what we will be doing? We will be checking whether the respective respective function is what we can say, whether the respective user is available or not, right? So here now validate credentials. So what we need to validate first, in order to validate, check if user exists. Okay, how we can check? Here, if this is the function, right? If this function, right? Did you see? If this function exists, what is username? I have to I'll be getting username here, right? Cool. If it is exist, then just test one by one. Okay. So for this one, in order to test it, right? So we can also individually test the functionality. Okay. So here, valid user. So now what I'm going, see, we tested individually. Now I'll be calling this function, okay, with username and verb, like some white box testing, meaning within the application. Okay. So I'll be passing username and password. Okay. For example, username is John Doe, or let me try with some. That's what. No, let me make some Kumar Makala. Let me give a wrong one, and then password is 1234, for example. If I trigger this out again, this would rise error only again, right? Did you see this? See, valid user, since it's the wrong credentials, because I call this valid credentials, but what happened? It taken username and password into U1P, and when it triggering here is valid user. So meaning from this function, it went to here, parse that user details here, and here it checks if user credentials. If it is available, then true, else false. Did you got it? Now let's try to test it with the valid positive scenario where username is John Doe. Got it? And password is John at 1234. Makes sense, right? Now if I execute this, did you see there is no issue with this? So why there is no issue? Because this function returns true. Did you got it? This function returns true. So now user validation is successful. So once it is a true, returns true if user validation successful. Otherwise, false. You got it? Yeah. Now, once the user is valid, then what I can do? I can check the password, right? So how I can check the password? It's very simple. So if what is the dictionary name? What is the dictionary that has the username and password? User credentials, right? Right. Now here you have to pass, right? Here user credentials. So what is the credentials? User, see here, if user credentials of user. So if you since you are what you are doing, you are trying to accessing the uh, database password. by using its key, correct? So what is the value of this? What is the value of this? You will get this password, is it? You got it? Since you are accessing through key, you will get this password, right? And once you have the password, what you have to do? You have to do a equality check. Double equal to p. Make sense? So we are taking the username, and we are fetching the by using this user underscore credentials of you. You means what? Username, right? So with this, I'll get this data. Got it? Then what I will be doing? I'll be checking this password of this user with the password entered by the user. Make sense? If it is valid, if both are equal, then if both password also both password matches, then return true. Okay. Else say raise error value. It's not a value error, permission error. Permission error. Say incorrect password. Incorrect password entered. Make sense? Guys, did you understood how I am writing it? Yeah. So permission, if it is not a valid password, then immediately raising a error, permission error. Say incorrect password entered. Okay. Say please try again later. Got it? And so you can also implement logic where once it's incorrect password, so ask user to like we will implement that as well. That's fine. But we need to see, now did you see small program becomes uh, small program becomes bit bit huge, because see when it comes to real time, we used to write this way only. Okay, we will not embedded everything in one place where it it the lack of readability and maintainability. But this makes more sense, no? See, for one function to get the credentials, like one function to get get validate username and password, but one more function to validate only user. You got it? And one function to check, one function to call. This is a driver function. So basically, this is the main function we call. From here, the remaining three function will be triggered automatically. Did you got it? Now, now let's test this function one more time. Now, see validate user credentials. Now, John Doe, comma. So meaning checking one by one function. Whenever we write something, right, we will validate. We will verify that whether that function is working properly or not. Make sense? Yeah. So here, two user details are there, John Doe and Adriano. Make sense? And when we are when you are calling, when you are testing these two users, right? So here, so John Doe and John at the rate 1234. So if I trigger this print, when I print this, right? Did you see? It didn't true because I have neatly presented whatever whatever function independently, right? So I'm sure that it will return me true. Now, for example, let's say now I have given a wrong password, wrong username. You see, there are certain use cases, right? So this first use case, John Doe, meaning valid valid username, password. Okay, and you are see that's what when it comes to implementation itself, we will inform you that that how the functionality should behave. If it is a valid, the function should return true. If it is, let's say, invalid user, so once the username is invalid, We don't care about what password they entered. You got it? Yeah. So let's do that. The same function this time. Let me put it in a commented block there, so that you know John Doe, for example, one. Right? If I trigger this, it has to raise error. Did you see? It is properly raised error. Invalid user John Doe one attempting to log in. Guys, did you observe what's happening? Your application should behave properly whenever there is input. And let's say this is one use case. When there is invalid user, it has to raise error saying that invalid user entered. Got it? If one of the value is incorrect, you should not you should not enter. Now next one is valid user and invalid invalid password, for example. This scenario, take this out. Let's say I forgotten four, right? So sometimes, right, we used to type it down, but is it 1 2 3 4 or 1 2 3 4, right? 1 2 3 or 1 2 3 4 or 1 2 3 4 5? We might forget, right? So yeah. Did you see? Again, invalid user John Doe one attempting login. Okay, I must have changed this. Yeah, I just I just made a valid user and incorrect password. So valid user John dot Doe here, John dot Doe, right? And John at the rate 1 2 3, but original password is John at the rate 1 2 3 4. Okay, I missed this. That's where I made a invalid password. Make sense? If I go and trigger this, it should say that permission error. Did you see this? Permission error. Incorrect password entered. Please try again later. Make sense? Right. Next, what is other use case? Even if both, let's say, if both username and password invalid, then it will immediately fail for only username itself. It will not check for password. Okay, use cases: invalid user name and invalid password. Okay, so both are incorrect. That's the catch here. If both are incorrect, let's say instead of John Doe, so this time Doe dot John. Okay, but this is a different user. You got it? And if I go and export this, did you see? So invalid user trying to attempting to log in. Who is Doe dot John? Yeah, makes sense. No, any questions in this, guys? This is a particular example. This is one of the very good use case, and for you it looks very simple. Hey, I think you are implementing login functionality, right? But when you start implementing, see how how neatly it got organized. Yeah. Is any questions now from anyone? No. Is everyone good at this? Because see, when it comes to the implementations, even in the interview, right? So let's switch back here. Yeah, even in the real-time application, we used to start writing like this. Okay, and even I think you should start writing a beautiful code like this. You should say, you should put documentation string, at least one liner. Say, um, returns returns the returns username and password. You got it? And even see, you can also do one more thing. One more thing that, see, instead of taking username and password, if you see when you're working with a Gmail password, right? So let's say if your username is incorrect, it will not take you to the next page, right? Next level, is it? it will block you there itself. Meaning what they're doing after taking the username, right? If you're making some incorrect password, for example, sorry, incorrect username, right? So what it's supposed to be, they'll say like a if directly they'll call this valid user. Make sense? You can do like this also. If it is valid user, no, I'm talking about another use case, guys. You got it? If it valid user, then fine. It will ask for other thing. If it is not valid user, your application will crash. Okay, but in real time, we will not crash the application. Instead, we will take the respective error message and push it to Splunk. Okay. Now, if you see, when I go ahead, oh sorry, I should not. I should enter. One second. Let me comment this block. Okay. Now imagine, let me call this authentication function. Okay, authentication function. When I make a call, generally it make a call to get credentials function. When it goes to here, get credentials, right? It will look for username and password, isn't it? And once we have a username and password, so first of all, after taking username itself, uh, so when I think one more important thing is even you can reduce one step, one step here, like. But anyway, like we can test a couple of use cases, then we will modify this program. Yeah, yeah. So here the function name is authentication. Okay, authentication. Now here I'm passing username and credentials. Let's say okay. So if I call this function, when I call this authentication function, right? Print. Let me cancel it. Rerun one more time. Oh, it is executing somewhere. I'm triggering one more. I think I clicked right there immediately. Yeah. All right. So I called the authentication function. Authentication function, what is the first statement? U comma P equal to get credentials. So it will go to get credentials block. And here, what is the first block? Here we had a documentation string, and then immediately we had a username equal to input function, which means that it is expecting input from the keyboard. Okay. Now let me say John. I mistakenly John. I mistakenly I didn't enter N John die, for example. Did you see? Immediately it is failing. Did you see this? Okay, here not we have to pass username, like username, this value here. That's where it is calling. It's not understanding what is you. Got it? Yeah. Now John Doe, John dot Doe. Did you see it? One second. Let me terminate this shell. Yeah. So the function execution, from where it will start? No, it will start from where the function call. This is a function call authentication. It goes here, started executing this. Make sense? Yeah. And John dot Doe, John dot D, for example. Did you see? It will not allow. So generally in the UI, what we do is when there is a invalid, right? When there is an invalid user, we will send the response back to the user saying that username is incorrect. Got it? So we will pump this information back to the Splunk. Also, we will return saying that user is incorrect. Username is incorrect. Yeah, makes sense, huh? Or we will say, yeah, instead of you can write the print statement here. Make sense? If I execute this now John Doe. john dot doi. Password is, what is the password? john at the rate 1234. Okay, it's not happy. What is the problem? User trying to log in with credentials, but it did not return anything. What? Because see, uh, yeah, let me take this out from here and here. Okay. So what basically happened is, so get credentials is fine. It has taken username and password. Okay. And when it comes to get credentials, it taken only it taken only what, username and password. And what kind of validation, now here what we have to do, we have to pass the valid credentials actually here. Got it? If I call this now, username means u, password means p. Got it? And this particular function returns true if both the username and password is correct. Got it? And if you say this, if validate user credentials, username and password, if both, if this returns true, right, then you will get, let's say if the both username and password is valid, then it returns true, else permission error. If it is true, then say print user, say user format string authenticated successfully, user authenticated successfully. That message and return true. You got it? Yeah. Now, if I go and if I go and call this, if I go and call this function, once again, let me remove this. Username is john.doy, password john 1234. Did you see this? So when there is successful, you are seeing lost, right? This true. You got it? Which means when you got it true, which means that user validation is proper. User is properly authenticated. Yeah. So guys, any confusion in this? Any confusion or you need any clarity on this? Or you're fine? Right. How about Aparna? Right. Okay. So Molly, fine. You okay with it? Is it? All right. Makes sense. And guys, so this is how we do in a enterprise level. Okay. Now let's try to understand how we do at LKG level. Just kidding, but yeah. So like we were doing it all these things, right? All these nasty things, correct? But it's very easy. For example, if I want to try quickly, so let's say, uh, so how junior developer will do, right? This authentication. Let me stop. Let me not call anything. Okay. If I execute this, I should not get anything on the screen. All right. Now, right now I have this. See, don't think no. You don't have anything. I just what we can say. I don't call this any function. Just we have a function definition, right? Yeah, makes sense. Now, so one go if you want to do a validation, how I can do? Let's say simply uh, say or function to function validate. So instead of doing every other job, right, simply validate user. Okay. So inside this function, I'll take username, password equal to, yeah, uh, like this, username equal to input, enter username, and password p equal to, you can type down password, guys. Okay. Enter the password. Got it? So now we have username and password. Simply, if what is the dictionary name holding the username and password? This one, right? This one. If user credentials of you, you means username. Okay. User credentials of username double equal to, okay, p. You got it? So what does really mean? Here, user credentials of you means what it will written. So, for example, I entered a let's say John Doe, for example. So, meaning user credentials of John Doe, which means we are trying to access this value using John Doe key. You got it? Dictionary key access, guys. If you are not understanding, which means that you are not practicing any data types, how you are accessing, right? So when it comes to list, we are accessing through index number. When it comes to dictionary, we will access through what? Key and value pair, right? Meaning key. Yeah. And if it is this, let's say if user credentials of you double equal to p, which means that written true. Guys, understood? Else, say print username, username or password correct. You got it? This is a very basic validation, Instead of doing this all job, right? You can do in a single way. Now valid user, for example, or login, for example. Let's say login function name is login. See, if you want to log in, he has to enter. When I try this, if I go and execute this, so when I want to log in, so he has to enter username, right? So username is, let's say, John Doe, and password John at the rate 1234. Did you see it? Since I'm not printing it, I got this one only. But if I print it, you'll come to know. If print login, so I'm giving some incorrect one. So John and John at the rate 1234. Did you see this? So key error. John is not there. Did you get it? Instead of if key is not there, even if you want to try that itself, what you can do is you can block here itself. If if you not in if you not in user underscore credentials, okay, then there is permission error. Previously I added a value error, right? I think you can replace with permission error because email id, sorry, username and password both are comes under permissions. Yeah, value error also makes sense, but permission error sounds good. Okay, say incorrect user, right? You make sense? Now, if I try this same thing again, now if I go back here, let's say if I want to do Same. John. Did you see this? Immediately it says, hey, permission error. You got it? Yeah, like this. So this particular line to take the input, take input for username. Got it? And so this particular section, validate the username. Next, take take the password. You got it? So once you have the password, right? This is the dynamically entered by user. Let's say from the login, he is trying to enter some password. That password it is, and we are checking against user credentials of you, meaning whatever the username we are passing here. So, for example, let's try it for Adriana this time. When I execute this, let me figure this out. Name is Adriana, right? And password. So let's say if I want to copy paste, I just paste it. Okay. Did you see this? Adriana password is correct. And when I try it one more time with some other user, I want to cancel this out. Kumar, did you see this? Immediately it raises error. Yeah, this is a very simplistic way where you can implement the functionality. But this missing, if when you look at this, so what did you notice? This is not a readable. Did you see that? That's why while learning itself, we started writing program like this. So one function to get the credentials, username and password. One to validate the credentials, username and password. One to validate only username. Before making any username and password validation, let's test validate the user, whether it's exists user. Then only we will move forward. Otherwise, we will not. Okay. And this is the driver. This is the way. This is where the driving function, like a driver function, we used to say, right? Main function that we call here, and from here only the rest of the jobs taken. Rest of the function calls will be triggered out. Guys, did you understood? Any questions? And instead of making this whole whole bunch of things, again I written a small logic, but it comply with the same thing. Whatever we have done here, same thing. But there is a complexity is like this is not readable. This is readable. Yeah, makes sense. Correct. No, not login, like not second time, right? As soon as you try, as soon as you're trying attempting login, let's say from the browser, you entered username and password, right? It will come to the backend. It will make the call, make a call to the login, API. So this is a login API. You got it? So generally, this information is available here. Got it? But this information will not be available directly in this place, right? Instead, it will be available in the respective provider. Let's say gmail.com, for example, right? Google.com. So who is the provider? Google, correct? So what we do is we had a again from since it's a basic one, we were testing directly here. But when it comes to the real time, right, we'll make a API call to the respective provider, providing the username and password. So they will check the identity of the respective, user. If it is valid user, then we will get a response saying that yeah, this is a valid user. Otherwise, not. Make sense? Correct. So it's not we will not do a register functionality because no, actually when it comes to register, right, which means that you are logging to the respective provider, or what they do is they will create a credentials for you. For example, when you join to a company, right, what they do is they will go to the respective provider, they will create username and password for you. Understood? And they'll share you separately. Yeah, that's what the real time scenario. But yeah, we will also touch that point. But currently, in order to work on those complex things, right, we need to first of all understand the basic fundamentals. How it's supposed to be. That's where imagine this is the provider, provider has your information like username and password, assuming that we were implementing the functionality. Not this way, but we will implement this style. Make sense? So you should start, and this is a very basic, again, this is a very basic functionality. And in the recent, sessions, we also had a password validation. Aparna, did you remember? So password validation. So password should be, minimum 8 digits, right? Hmm. So now what we have to do is we should go ahead and implement we should incorporate those changes also. Let's say for example, after taking username, now you have taken the password, right? So password before making a validation, before uh, going to any other things, like in this in this step itself, after taking username you are doing validation, right? Same way, write a validation, df password validation. Got it? You'll be parsing the password. Okay. And whatever the logic which we have written, so your logic will be here. You got it? Like password should be 8 characters, and it must have one uppercase letter or lowercase letter, and one special case letter, for example. Got it? So you should build this logic, and if you build and come back with the code, I'll review it. Yeah, makes sense. Hmm. So if you have any questions. Mhm. Okay, the question here is, and the use case, since we already incorporated or implemented the password validation function earlier session, right? So try to implement in this functionality also. Anyway, I'll be sharing this with you, right? So along with username is fine. Let's say you can take a number of even username also can be, let's say, minimum of 4 characters, and it should not have a username cannot have a what we can say, username cannot have a special characters, for example. Let's say only special character allowed is a dot, for example. Let's say when it comes to Gmail, right? So how this is implemented? You can have a Gmail with a dot, correct? Let's say a Priyanka dot, for example, Naveen, right? You can have that, but you cannot have a Priyanka like the question mark Naveen. You should not do like this. You got it? So such kind of even validation should be taking place in the background. And when it comes to password, again, password should be validated. You should have a 8-digit character in that. Check about Google, how Google had a use case. So we will try to mimic the same use case and implement it for our scenario. Make sense? Yeah. Any questions on this? We're good. Okay. All right. I think that's all for now. If you start incorporating those changes and implement the functionality, that would be great. And once you're done with your handout, right? So please try to share with us. We can review and provide the feedback on this. Yeah.